Hello and welcome to the very short version of GroupM Romania's guide on how to advertise in the time of coronavirus. My name is Victor Rotariu and it's my pleasure to present to you our point of view on advertising and marketing in this difficult time, adapted to Romania specifically, in which we aim to answer three important questions for you as a company, as an advertiser. First is if you should advertise during this period. Second is if you do advertise, what you should communicate. And third, how you should communicate, namely, what are the opportunities in terms of touch points. And the cause of this problem is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which we have started calling a unicorn virus because in tech, we invented the term unicorn for companies which achieved never before seen growth in really short time, like Uber, Airbnb, Instagram. Well, this new coronavirus appears to be the first unicorn virus. It is the first really global pandemic, as it has basically taken hold in all countries in the world almost, and it grows too quickly to be contained by government measures. Right now, in most of the world and in Romania, we are still in the exponential growth phase. We have not reached a peak as far as we know. It is not yet clear when that peak will come and how high it will be. This has been recorded at 1st of April 2020. We will issue regular updates because, as we all know, the situation changes dramatically, both from a health perspective, legal, people's behavior, and business and marketing. So right now, we have had many clients coming to us to ask us whether they should continue advertising during this period. And there are many potential reasons to stop advertising. And I will tackle each of them separately. The most applicable is that companies fear that people are not buying their products right now, that people are focused only on the essential, personal hygiene, household cleaning, and food items for stockpiling. And this is true for the moment. Romania has had a late start, so to speak, and we have forewarning of what will happen looking at countries where the pandemic grew earlier, like Italy or China or Spain. And what we see there is that in the pandemic, there are moments of panic whenever there is alarming news, like the first death or first severe restrictions on population movement, etc. And in those moments of panic, people focus only on buying the essentials and they care little for anything else. However, between those moments of panic, there are relative calm periods. And in these periods, people also buy the non-essential items which they want and use in their regular lives. In Romania specifically, 2 weeks ago, which was the first week of, let's say, serious pandemic, um, there was a decrease in non-essential items searches proportional to essential items. However, there was not that much of a decrease when it comes to the retail data from Nielsen on consumer goods. So the sales did not decrease, they actually increased for food overall. And last week, search data also shows an increase in the non-essential searches, like, for example, beauty. So this tells us that people will have already actually started buying non-essentials and will continue to do so. More important than the shopping during the crisis is what happens in the recovery phase and after the whole pandemic stops. Because in the recovery phase, people will get out of this shock and panic mode, and this period of uncertainty will lead many of them to reconsider many of their choices in life, including product and brand choices. And also there will be a boom in consumption during that period as people are feel free and want to exert that freedom. Now, their brand choices during the recovery and in the long term greatly depend on the power of your brand. We saw that strong brands recover 9 times quicker from a recession than weak brands based on 2008 data. And the power of your brand will be greatly determined by what you do during this crisis. Because for most people, this is the most dramatic and uh, anxiety provoking change that they have ever gone through and might ever go through. And people relate to brands as people. And as Romanians say, a friend in need is a friend indeed. So if a brand supports them and helps them during this period, they will in turn support that brand in the long term. If a brand disappears during this period, then consumers will likely also make the brand disappear from their shopping list. Another worry is that purchases right now are automatic, that people buy brands that they usually buy, which is true. The data shows that people, yes, do tend to do that. However, as stated before, your actions now are not that relevant for the shopping right now. They're relevant for the shopping after the crisis and in the years to come. Now, another reason is that it might be too risky to advertise during the pandemic. I mean, marketing, let's say, common sense is to avoid delicate and risky subjects. However, this is a subject you cannot avoid. It is everywhere. It affects everybody profoundly. Um, and basically saying nothing about it takes you out of people's minds. And we know from the Byron Sharp research that not having mental availability means not having sales. So it is only risky to advertise in this period if you do not adapt both your messages and your actions as a business to the crisis. And we will see how to do this further on. Another worry is that nobody actually cares about brands. They care about the virus. Completely true. And success right now is comes from being relevant for people dealing with this problem. It doesn't come from showing that your product is better than the competition product or talking about your brand. Another logistical problem for many clients is that their creatives are not appropriate, which we see is not good, and that they cannot change them because the restrictions, the difficulties in production, and the usual long production times. And the reality is, yes, in the normal way of doing things, that would be a barrier. Such dramatic crisis needs dramatic changes to adapt. And this means changing your procedures for production, changes your procedures in terms of how much time it takes you to put something out there. And this means, on one hand, accepting more imperfection, because taking the time to polish creatives like you usually do means they will be just too late. And on the other hand, it means finding new ways to do things. For example, we have clients who have taken a TVC with a non-coronavirus related message. They have taken out the voiceover, put a soundtrack, and put another story through text on top of it so that it becomes relevant to the coronavirus crisis. Then there is the objectively biggest problems, businesses who are in the situation that they cannot sell basically products or services anymore. Either they don't have stocks or distribution capabilities, or even worse, they are closed by lockdown, like restaurants, hotels, many stores, malls in Romania. And this is true, and it is a big problem. And it's first of all a big financial problem, which you need to address, and that's a whole separate discussion. From a long-term perspective and a communication perspective, being silent right now only amplifies the damage of this period of lack of revenue. And there are possibilities. There are many examples of companies who either change their revenue streams, like restaurants who partner to give out takeaway, even though people are not coming there anymore, or to use their capabilities, which they can't use for their own products, to help in the fight against coronavirus, like alcohol manufacturers or perfume brands who are making disinfectant. And that goes a long way in creating revenue for when the restrictions are lifted. If you do nothing now, it will be much worse afterward. So the idea is that it's critical to communicate during this period for your long-term health. Of course, not everything is good, and there should be much more care than usual in what you communicate. And we have some not to do indications. First of all, do not appear to be profiting from the pandemic. It is possibly the worst thing you could do. The second worst thing might be to disappear. And the third worst, well, equally worse as the second, is to continue business as usual when your messaging and products have nothing to do with the pandemic and become irrelevant in the context of coronavirus. Like, for example, I don't know, you sell vitamins and you show people dancing with the energy together, or traveling, or doing such things which have been forbidden during this time because they pose a health risk. Then it is very important right now not to make promises that are not backed up with some action or data, because in this world of distrust that we are right now, people are much more critical. And in terms of your own decisions as a company and as a marketer, we are all affected by what's happening. We need to let our emotions at the virtual door and make rational long-term plans for what happens. If we act emotionally out of panic, our actions cannot be the right ones. In terms of what to communicate, the to-do list, there are three principles that guide communication, and then we'll talk about directions of what to communicate explicitly. The first is to take a long-term perspective. Short-term sales are neither predictable, they are not under your control to a large degree because they depend on outside events. You cannot try to tackle them directly because any hard sell messages will be seen as ambulance chasing and are, in the grand scheme of things, less important for your brand and your company then what happens in the recovery in the next 2-3 years. So you need to take a long-term view. Then you need to always show that you put people ahead of profit. And this means care in how you communicate, what you communicate, but also in what you do. And this is the third point, that it is a time when actions speak louder than words. Um, it might have become in advertising and marketing a bit of a no-no to talk about the good things that your company is doing. Um, Many companies have separate foundations which act basically separate from the company itself. This is a moment when those separations need to disappear. This is a moment when your brand needs to take a stand and consistently, actively, and clearly help in people in this period. They are explicitly demanding that. Because at the end of the day, a friend in need is a friend indeed, and now people are in need. Now, some directions to communicate. We see three big directions. First of all, is show that you are safe for consumers and employees, so that there is no risk of catching coronavirus from interacting with your company or from buying your products or using your services, neither for the buyers nor for your own employees. Second is to support the fight against coronavirus in any way, shape, or form. Uh, it is probably better to support in a way that is in line with your products, your perceived expertise, and your brand positioning and purpose. But if there is no direct link, donations are also better than nothing. MasterCard, for example, initially donated money to an NGO who was buying medical equipment in Romania, but now more recently have started using their own expertise to support coronavirus fights through their basically um, financial tech expertise and infrastructure. So it can take time to develop appropriate responses, and it is useful to keep doing things to stay on top of it. And third of all is to help people get through what is the perceived difficulty, because the threat is the coronavirus, but in practice, most of us are not sick with the virus. Most of us perceive the restrictions and the changes in our lifestyle as the difficulties. Um, and so when it comes to supporting the effort to fight the pandemic, I already said about donating, about using your expertise to fight directly. It can also be through your products. If you have products which are suitable to fight, to help people protect themselves and in this crisis, it can also help to instill believable positivity, because the news is only bad and getting worse. People are dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, and any ray of hope is very valuable. The tricky part is to make sure it is believable. So putting behind data, putting behind actions that give people a reason to believe that positive message. Not just saying it will be okay, but saying it will be okay because of this thing that I know or that I did. And last but not least, helping people protect themselves directly. Um, so, for example, instructions on how to do various things so that they are safe in terms of infection, how to maybe practices to support their immunity, like taking care of sleep, which is a big unleveraged area, but with tremendous impact on immunity. Or it can be, if you are in the food or pharma, by promoting products which support their immunity. Then supporting their adaptation to this new lifestyle with restriction. The most practical area is help and facilitation in the digitalization of previously offline services and needs. So from remote work to remote education for children to remote dating, remote dinner parties, remote nightclubs like we see live streaming in China. Um, People are finding ways to meet their needs from home using the power of the internet and technology. Then there is the whole area of entertainment, as there is a lot of newfound boredom as we are all locked inside. And it can be to provide content or to facilitate access to content or to partner with content creators. Then there is the part of easing the people's limitations in this new lifestyle. And on one hand, it's practical limitations, like for example, there is a spike in the searches for do-it-yourself haircut because people cannot go and have their haircut. So if it's relevant to your brand, just putting a video tutorial how to cut your own hair or how to have your wife cut it could be very valuable in this time. That's just one example. Next example, if you're a do-it-yourself or furniture store, helping people repair little small problems in their home because they cannot call a handyman. Then there are the financial issues. People are worried, and some people have direct financial impact. So if you're in the financial industry, supporting people, easing their burden right now would go a long way. And there is also the emotional aspect, the anxiety, the loneliness, the information overwhelm, all of these emotional burdens that people have to face right now. Um, and you can choose one that is in line to your brand and just get people to access relevant content or create it from scratch to help them ease this problem. And then it's about supporting their new behaviors, attitudes, habits. For example, cooking has become a very big hobby right now because it's soothing, because we like food, we are anxious, we're at home. So helping people cook in this pandemic specifically is relevant. So not just any recipes, but recipes that you can do with ingredients that you have in the home or recipes that boost immunity. That's just one example. In the in-depth report, we go through a lot of detailed directions. And then it's the whole area how to communicate. What are the touch point changes? What are the media plan changes? And besides the obvious thing that outdoor and cinema and print have decreased tremendously, there are some key factors, namely TV is an opportunity right now. We have big increase, third week of March crisis, so 40% increase versus the same week 2019. And there is some research from abroad that shows that the impact of TV has increased. So it's a good time to be on TV if you can produce a relevant TVC. Online, everything grows, of course. News on top. News can be tricky, depends on your message. But there are also the entertainment and hobby aspects which are safe for any brand, like cooking, like IT because of the whole digitalization, like celebrities because people are bored, they want socialization. People, of course, are searching for coronavirus content, but entertainment is growing and it will grow as the crisis lengthens. So huge increases in everything that is video, video on demand like Netflix, social media, gaming, podcasts, These are all opportunities. And of course, there are the opportunities in the new digital tools that people are using for the new lifestyle. E-commerce, video calls, social games, fitness at home, remote work, instructional content, especially as there's a lot of free instructional content now, online variants of events, which you can sponsor with the newly freed event budget because other events were canceled, electronic tourism, hobbies. And when it comes to actual media planning, you can keep a similar allocation in principle, of course, without the out-of-home touch points. TV, we suggest to keep or grow depending on the TVC. And in terms of online, you should adjust depending on your specific target because there are differences in the behavior changes depending on target. Everybody can use this period to leverage new touchpoint opportunities like gaming, like influencer projects, which are also a way to create content easily because the influencers do it. And also we have been working with our clients to put a higher focus on quality because there is a higher risk for the brand because there is so much fake news content around coronavirus and you do not want to be associated with it. And even in the real news, there is risk depending on your category and on your message to be perceived as inappropriate in the content of coronavirus. So depending on a case-by-case basis, we might decrease or even eliminate your ads appearance in news content to prevent negative backlash, but of course compensate through the all new entertainment opportunities. So this was a relatively short view of our guide to communication in the coronavirus times in Romania. Today on 1st of April 2020, you can find much more detail in our in-depth guide, which has over 100 pages. And we are here. Please contact us so that we can do great communication and get through this period stronger, healthy together.